So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mark to the stage. So, thank you so much, Mark, for making the time to join us today. Such a privilege to have you here. So, Mark is the CEO of W3 Digital, which is a consultancy in digital transformation. He has been working as a partner with Telstra for a while now, and he's an expert in complex digital transformations, not only around the strategy, but delivery as well. So Mark is definitely a thought leader. He has written more than 400 articles for organizations like the Australian Financial Review and BRW. He's also contributed to the Forbes Technology Council. And last but not least, he also ran masterclass for Deakin University for the MBA around digital transformation. So on the personal side of things, Mark, actually, I learned that in the last few weeks, he didn't give me permission to mention, but I will anyway. He sounds like he enjoys camping with his kids. He loves woodwork. He loves woodwork, anything crafty, art related. And according to his words, making sharp things makes him feel chilled. Go figure. So welcome, Mark. Thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, the making sharp things was a reference to making knives. So yeah, it does have to be chilled when you're making knives. Otherwise, you end up with quite bad cuts in your hands. So it's just a way of focusing.
Yes, and sharpening your attention is developing the laser focus, sharp mind, which is very related to what we advocate here at the Mindful CIO community. So let's start with perhaps a little bit of overview, Mark, of your journey, to become the CEO of W3 Digital and this remarkable thought leader that you are, So tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, yeah, sure. So yeah, I've got a kind of a squiggly pathway, my sort of journey. So like a lot of people, my career started in early 90s in New Zealand, as you can probably tell from my accent. I started actually in advertising and marketing. And then as kind of the internet was becoming a thing, and at that point, I joined a company called Hyperactive, which was eventually bought out by Accenture in New Zealand. So by sort of around about 2000, I sort of worked on kind of a lot of the big digital projects that were happening in New Zealand at that time, which wasn't a lot. It was digital strategy at that point was pretty anything we really said it was. We just make something up, and that's what flew. So I moved over to Australia in sort of around about April 2001. And I was planning on being here for about 12 months because I had a job lined up in New York. Then September 11 happened. That job ceased to exist. And by that point, I was doing kind of doing a bit of technology strategy, a bit of digital strategy, a bit of sort of marketing technology strategy, sort of around a bunch of different things because that was kind of the .com boom time. So I was doing that for a range of different companies like Telstra and Heinz and a bunch of other businesses like that. Joined the company I'm with now in 2003, and it was more kind of a branding advertising business. I took it over and moved the original partners out in about 2007, and restructured the business from where it was to becoming away from the kind of marketing space towards the digital sort of strategy. First with a bit of a customer focus, but then moving further and further, up into broad areas of the organization. And where we sit now is we work on a lot of digital transformation projects, technology projects. So both looking for future vision, moving technology decisions up often from the CIO's office into the boardroom, and then sort of helping organizations make the right decisions and feel confident in a space that often they're not feeling confident. That's fundamentally what we do.
In a nutshell.
Large range. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And with the the interaction we had before, you mentioned that some of the challenge. So talking about challenge opportunities for you in your role, you mentioned that the ambiguity and stakeholder management is very important for for your organization and your role. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, stakeholder management is a key part of what we do. We have to, when we're sort of developing a strategy and trying to get input in from various parts of the organization, particularly if it's something that, if it's viewed as a technology project, but it's actually becoming quite a long-term strategic initiative, we have to sort of get more of the organization involved and get more people actually sort of seeing through that lens. And it becomes, it becomes a tricky balance, to be able to work out how to get alignment along the way. And also, I mean, a lot of what I teach at Deakin, when I'm teaching the digital transformation masterclasses there, as part of the sort of executive MBA, is that kind of digital transformation really, particularly in the current environment, is much less a conversation around technology and much more a conversation around courageous leadership and sort of stepping into the unknown, and helping people realize that you can't have all the information. You just have to be able to be brave and step forward.
So very much around people and people leadership as well. Okay. From the 10 declarations of the manifesto, Mark, which one do you relate the most, and why would that be?
So I mean, there was the one about how do we make technology more human, and that's been a real theme of mine for a very, very long time. I remember doing some work with SAP North America a few years ago. We were working in the transformation office there, and part of our role was to look at what was going to happen with consumer data as it became more prolific. More businesses were able to access it. Where was that going to look? Where was it going to head? And there was a clear direction being formed, which is kind of where we are a little bit now, which is businesses will collect lots of information and segment it and use it to drive basically smarter and smarter spam, essentially. Stuff that people don't want. And then we said, well, what else could we do with that? Because that's essentially just interrupting people and actually not providing real value. What else could that pathway look like? So we spent a long time, working with a range of different parts of that organization, looking at how that could be reformed, and there could be new business models built on the back of actually enabling consumers to do more interesting things rather than just advertise at them, essentially.
Okay, and now changing completely the topic, if we move to talk about self-care, so I mentioned a couple of things that I do, so maybe being out in nature. What are the things that are for you works to reset, recharge in terms of self-care?
Well, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think it's it's always a work in progress. I know towards the end of last year, I didn't spend enough time thinking about that and felt pretty burnt out by the end of it. But I'm sure I'm not alone. 2 years of sitting in front of Zoom, everybody was feeling pretty drained. But look, I mean, all the basic stuff. Obviously spending time with my kids and trying to be as present with them. Obviously, that helps enormously. Just take myself out of whatever's going on in my mind and just spending time with them, and that's incredibly important. And that's that's a big part of going camping and building new experiences for them. As I said before, working with my hands. I'm a creative person. I like building things and making things. And I find if you it just becomes very frustrating if you can't focus. And I've got a very large scar on one of my hands that sort of from making knives, and so I learned that lesson once. So I wasn't present at one point, and had to go to hospital. So so I think doing things that just try and create a singular focus, and just train the brain that way. I find that very rewarding. But I think you. Like all of us, you can sort of find moments of self-care in anything as long as you're sort of looking for it.
Absolutely. And shifting back to mindful leadership. So, we had that quick exercise on Menti. You don't need to share what are the words that you enter, but in a nutshell, when you think of mindful leadership, you actually mentioned something around managing the ego and our biases, and get whatever needs to be done done.
Yeah.
What else the mindful leadership means to you?
I mean, I think one of the things that that has always struck me. I'm a Kiwi, okay, so I'm a fan of the All Blacks, of course. And there was a really interesting book that came out a few years ago that was looking at the All Blacks and what made them great and so on. And they've got this sort of mantra, which was sweep the sheds. So, the All Blacks are, the world's best rugby team. They're the world's most successful sports team in any kind of arena. And everywhere they go around the world, they sweep the sheds they sweep the changing room and clean it up and leave it as spotless as they found it before they leave. So that whole idea of, just leveling yourself out, you're not better than anybody else. That to me, I found that very, absolutely remarkable. And there was when I was thinking about that, there was a story that the CEO of Netflix told, which was when he was working at his previous role. He used to work late and he was doing a lot of coding and so on. And he'd work late and drink a lot of coffee, and then every morning he'd get in and the coffee cups would be cleaned away and put away. And he said, it was like several months into this where he realized he came in like at 4 o'clock in the morning and found the CEO was the one that was picking the coffee cups up and cleaning them. And to me, that's I think that kind of being humble, and we've all got egos, but just knowing when to identify it and check it, I think is important.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks so much for sharing that, Mark. And very aligned with servant leadership, which is something that we advocate as well. In terms of the Mindful CIO community, the Mindful CIO movement, the manifesto, you were very, very busy, but I did dare to ask you to get involved, and you said yes, and I was very excited. So what led you to say yes, and why do you think, the Mindful CIO community or movement is important?
I just think it's important. So, I mean, again, coming back to the stuff I teach at Deakin, so, I mean, that course is designed for executives or people who may be just about to become executives, but senior leaders from usually larger organizations who are about to be stepping into something that resembles a digital transformation role. They may come from a technical background, they may come from a business background, they may come from a more of a strategic background. And they're all sort of coming at it going, what do I, how do I make this work? They're feeling very confused, they're feeling slightly overwhelmed, they're trying to get across all the different technology trends and all this sort of stuff that, as we know, it's actually impossible to do. But the very first, one of the first things I say is that you can't do that. You can't overwhelm yourself. You won't succeed if you try and do that. The only thing you can do is manage yourself, and then think about how you're going to be managing, the people that you work with, and think about the culture around you, and the culture. The more the culture is, is focused on delivering value, to particularly to the customers. The more the culture is focused on supporting each other, the more likely you are to succeed, and however you decide to set it up. And I think that's, to me, I find that sort of that level of mindfulness and that openness of conversation incredibly important in what we do.
Excellent. Thank you. And what leadership lesson, you have such a diverse background and experience. I'm sure you have many leadership lessons under your belt, but what is one that comes to mind that you'd like to share with the group?
I think, so many. I think the one that whenever I ask that question, the one that always jumps to my mind, the memory that jumps to my mind is a conversation I had with my father when I was a teenager. And it's a comment that everybody kind of would recognize and understand now, but to me, it was something that, I took on board, but I didn't fully understand. And it took probably another 20 years to really understand what it really meant, which was, if you when you're building a business, you're trying to build success, surround yourself with people who have strengths and your weaknesses. And, we've heard that, we know that we hear that kind of like regularly, but the thing I found, the reason I find that as a clear memory, and it became more profound as I grew older, was the fact that in order to do that, you have to have a clear view of what your weaknesses are. You have to have that self-reflection and understand what am I not good at? And have the courage to also say, well, I'm not good at that, and it's probably not worth my while trying to get good at it, because that you end up becoming jack of all trades, master of none. So, I think that's what I found to be pretty profound statement.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. For those who want to learn a bit more, Mark, in the Mindful Sale community website, in his profile page, there is a list of some of the many articles he published now across Salesforce, Forbes, and you name it. Is there any other resource, Mark, or any maybe final words that you'd like to share with the group? Any final message in relation to technology and human-centric leadership or mindfulness in that space?
Yeah, I think where we're at right now is a really interesting sort of moment. Like we've been through. I think if we're looking at kind of global politics, global kind of economy wise, when the GFC hit, the big problems facing businesses were how do we locate, engage, and retain a customer, and that created a lot of focus on human-centered design. Made us think about the world in different ways, made us put people and emotions kind of at the center of a lot of things as we learn. This time around, COVID hit, and we've got got lots of different things going on. We've got a generational shift in resources, sort of employment shifts going on. And the biggest challenge that is facing most businesses is how do we locate, engage, and retain talent? And it's really, again, I just find it, really profound that even though there is huge, like everything is being impacted by technology, there are massive kind of global shocks to the economic system. In the end, it's actually how are we relating to other people, and how are we as ourselves sort of, managing those relationships. So I find that, I just find that super interesting.
Absolutely. Okay, with those that insight and wise words, we will say thank you. Thanks so much for your time, Mark. You're most welcome to hang out if you can afford, a few more minutes. We'll jump into breakout room discussions. Otherwise, if you need to excuse yourself, that's totally fine as well.
I'll stay a little bit longer, and then I'm pretty sure that one of my children has been knocking on the door. So, it's